Tonight's speaker comes from us from the Turin Lost and Found group named Tamara.
I'm Tamara. I'm an alcoholic. Wow. So I'm supposed to say how grateful I am to be up here, but I'm not really feeling it right now because I am caught up in Tamara at the moment. But I am grateful because Alcoholics Anonymous saved, my life. So I'm supposed to tell you what it was like, what happened, what it was like, and what it is today. I think, my first addiction was fantasy. As a child, I can remember, like I lived in my head or lived in a book or something. And for me, it was a safe place because I came from a house that I didn't always feel safe in. And so I spent a lot of time by myself in my room or outside. And I still kind of feel safer when I'm, by myself and struggle sometimes with that, with actually being around people. And but I love being around people, but it just takes a minute to get there. So growing up, I was the youngest of 3 girls, and my oldest sister, she pretty much knew what she wanted to do at 3. She wanted to be a ballet dancer, and that's what she did. My other sister is a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and she actually will be celebrating 4 years in September, and then there's me. And so grew up, and my dad was really the reason that I did not feel safe in my house. He was verbally, physically abusive to all of us, and I don't know, I just kind of felt that's how it was, and I feared him, and I feared him for a long time, into sobriety. But I'm grateful for the steps and the women and men in this program, because it has allowed me to see him in a different way. And by the end, it allowed me to see him as I think his higher power saw him, which is a miracle today. And so, anyway, drinking, I grew up in a time when my parents, they drank. It was cocktails, cocktail parties, very social. There was always alcohol. I don't remember there not being alcohol. And whether they were alcoholics, I don't know. I can't say that for them. But they drank. They drank a lot, and I saw them, very drunk at times. My first drink, I don't know when it was, because they were very open about, like, have a sip, or, and so, but I do remember my first drunk, and I was 14, I drank like a 6-pack of some awful Pabst Blue Ribbon gross beer, and I just remember it was like wonderful. I felt like, just because I was such a, like, I don't know, as a kid I was kind of a weird, like, introvert kid, and I was super shy. And so when I drank, it was like, man, I felt like, it was wonderful. Even though I did black out and throw up, which pretty much is my story, just a little different along the way. And I just remember that next morning, like, feeling like horrible, and I had to go to church of all things, and with my best friend, and I just remember, I was like, God, I'm so thirsty, like, what is wrong, And I just kept, like, making my friend go get more orange juice and more. She's like, I can't, my mom's gonna, notice something, and I was just like, ugh, and so, and I don't know, like, how long it took for me to start drinking, but I believe that I drank alcoholically. There was no, like, progression. I drank to get drunk. I was never a daily drinker. I was more of a binge drinker, and I always blacked out. And the problem with blacking out is that I was never one that would was a mover. Like, I was never one that would sit around my house and drink. Like, I was always the one, like, let's do more, let's do more, let's go there, you know. And so it got me in a lot of trouble early on. I was in high school. I was in my junior year of high school, and I went to a football game drunk, and I was in there, and somebody was like, the principal is looking for you because they you know you've been drinking. And I was like, oh God. And so I left, but I was so drunk, and I was like, let's go back in. And so, like, you know, and like, I mean, that's what I did, because it was just like, that seemed like a good idea, you know. And so I went back in, you know, and long story short, I ended up in the principal's office at, like, you know, midnight or whatever. My parents came and had to get me, and I just remember, like, scrounging through the principal's office because I was, like, going to find a lighter because I was going to smoke a cigarette in that principal's office. And I mean, it's just, yeah. And so, so I had that happen, and they actually expelled me from public school. So my parents, it was another thing that happened where I ended up, my parents went out of town for, like, their, I don't know what, wedding anniversary to some country or something. I was supposed to be staying with my grandmother, and I was going to have this big party at my house. While, I mean, like, neighbors aren't going to see anything or whatever. Big keg party. And so I left this little window open so I could get back in the house, you know, and because they had locked, you know, so I couldn't get in the house. So I was supposed to be staying with my grandmother. And my dad left this note, "Found your way in." And I was like, okay. So, you know, smart camera would have been like, okay, well, party's off. I was like, nope. And so, you know, I busted the window and had this, you know, huge party. Cops came, you know, and I was like, and there was, you know, it's just, things were destroyed. This whole staircase, like, fell off. Somebody in the emergency room. I mean, it was just horrible. And my parents came back, and you know, I was like, okay, get everything fixed, and no. And so they were like, okay, you're either going to go to military school or boarding school. And I was like, no, I'm not going to military school. And so I went to boarding school. They sent me to boarding school, and they, you know, they thought that was, like, the best thing they ever did. But what they didn't know is that people that get sent to boarding school pretty much are all sent there for the same reason. And so it was, you know, it was a big party, and it was fun. I was kind of on my own a little bit, and it was in, like, the North Carolina mountains. And I don't know, it was a lot of fun. And I continued to drink, and got caught at, like, a soccer tournament drunk, and I remember coming back on the bus, and this guy that I was dating at the time, he was the first person that's ever said, you know what, Tamara, I think you have a problem with drinking. And I, you know, I was like, whatever. And so I got caught drinking because, you know, I just didn't like to stay quiet. I mean, I would get drunk and go into, like, you know, we had this canteen, you know, and I got drunk and, like, decided I was going to go in there, you know, there's teachers in there, you know, it's just, like, stupid shit, you know, and I would just go in there and, you know, act like nothing. And so it was, I got caught twice, and they had this, like, whole hearing and everything for me, and were like, if you drink again, you're not going to graduate. And so, you know, I drank again, and I did not graduate from high school, and until they made me go through 30 days of inpatient treatment. And so I went to graduation and didn't, you know, had the whatever blank diploma book, and left there and went to treatment. And I was like, this is just something I got to do. Check that box off. I'm done. And, you know, and a big part of, like, my drinking, and, you know, there's also other things, drugs involved here and there, but alcohol was, you know, was always, like, the first. And was the I struggled with, because I knew I was gay, and I really struggled with that. And so I think that was a big part of my drinking and drugging, because I could not, coming in the 80s, it was like totally different than today. And I still struggle to it to some degree because of fear of judgment, and it's a lot different, than it used to be. But yeah, it was really hard, and at that time. And so I went through this treatment, and these women, they like put me in this. I was like in this women's meeting, and they were like cornered me, and like were trying to get me to admit that I was an alcoholic, and I was just like, it's just I never said I was an alcoholic. And so I left that place, and I didn't think about like, oh, my parents paid for me to go to treatment. Oh, they paid for me to go to boarding school. I didn't think about any of that shit. And so I was like, just thinking about me. And so as I never was like this ambitious person. I went to school, but, I lived in my head. I was like fantasy, always out, and I didn't study, and I had no motivation to go to school or do anything. I just wanted to party. And so my dad was like, no, you're going to school. And so I went to this community college in Charlotte, and I ended up leaving in the middle of the night because my dad and I got in this huge fight. And my mom was like, I think it's best that you just leave while he's sleeping. And so I left and moved to Charlotte, and it was just a party. My parents paid for my school, they paid for me to live, and all I did was party, the whole time, and ended up getting in a relationship with the drug dealer, and, it got really messy there. And that relationship got abusive, and I kept going back, and then not, and back, and I knew I drank differently by this point. It took a long time before I realized that I was the one that was always the last one, and and everybody knew it too, that I was always the last one, just drank. They're like, Tamara, if you just didn't, and these people drank a lot. But they were like, if you just didn't drink so much, and so, because I was always the one that would do stupid shit, I'd sleep with your boyfriend, or I'd sleep with, and it's just like, and I don't even like guys, but I would do that shit, and anyway, and so I finally I was like so like depressed, and I'd been depressed since I was a teenager, and just like suicidal, and just couldn't figure out like what was wrong with me, and this relationship I was in ended, or I don't know, it was, whatever, something happened, and I don't even remember what happened, but it seemed like it was big at the time. And I took a bottle of sleeping pills, and the next thing I know, I'm like in the emergency room, and my roommate, this guy, is sitting next to me, and he's just like, Tamara, oh. And I was like, and I didn't, remember what happened, but I called my mom, because they had to, escort me from the hospital to a mental hospital, and I had to stay there for 72 hours, and I called my mom, and I was like, I just think about that day of like when I called her and told her that I had tried to kill myself, and I have kids today, and I can't even imagine that, if one of my kids called and said that. And so she came, and I packed up all my stuff in Charlotte and moved back to my parents' house and went through treatment. And, it just was this endless cycle of, I'd go through treatment, I'd get a couple months, go through, it's just, and I had multiple DUIs, actually, before I was even 21. And I really didn't have a driver's license for a long time, and rode MARTA everywhere. Or I would drive, I got arrested in Virginia Highlands, right on Ponce and North Highland, driving without a license, no insurance. And the woman that I was in a relationship, we stole a tag to put on the car, from somebody else's. I mean, this was like, second date, and so we put the tag on the car, and I got pulled, and they laid me out on the car, and paddy wagon come, and I'm like, oh my God, it was so embarrassing. And so, yeah, and I mean, there was many stories, many of those type of things that happened, and it just, there was, when I came in to Alcoholics Anonymous in 1999, there was not anything major that had happened, but it was just, I could not do it anymore, and the desperation, I mean, I'd gone into Alcoholics, I'd gone to meetings, but I never did anything, I would sit in the back of the meeting, and I would just look at, and I was extremely anxious, because I had drank so much in any social situation. I was so anxious, I could not even say my name in a meeting. And there's some people here that knew me back then, and I was just a mess. And so I could never stay sober, because it was just, being inside my body was horrible. But I didn't do anything, I just thought, well, if I come to meetings, then it's going to get better, and it didn't. And so I came in '99, and Clarkston was my home group, and I went to meetings, but then I was got in a relationship, had 6 months, and I don't know about you, but I like to focus on anything but myself, and so that was, something I did, and people told me, Tamara, you should not do this, and it was with somebody in recovery, and I did, and it, I think it, I know I would not suggest it, and it took a lot away from my recovery. I was still very depressed, and so anyway, fast forward, then we bought a house before about a year, and so it's oh, okay, and then I wake up, and I'm all of a sudden I'm damn, what's going on? Because I've just been in this whatever world of relationship, and obsession or whatever it is, and I had about 3 years, and my mom died suddenly, and my mom was it's been 22 years, and I still can tear up thinking about her, and she was my everything, and I did not have anything. I didn't have a foundation, I hadn't worked all the steps, I didn't have a network, I didn't have any of that. And I just, she died suddenly, and it was just, unbearable, the pain. And I, cried, probably every night myself to sleep for at least a year. And I wanted to die. Because I just was I did not want to feel that pain. It was horrible, horrible pain. And, but I remember, my sponsor, I was I'm not going to kill myself, because I could see my dad, what he was going through, and I was I cannot do that to him, I cannot do that to him. And it was horrible to see him, what the grief that he went through. And so my sponsor was I need you to do what I tell you to do. And I was okay. And I did. And I did everything. I didn't care. I was whatever you need me to do. And I chaired meetings, and I lived at Clarkston all day long. Meetings all day long. I stayed there. I chaired meetings. I would speak, whatever. And I did H&I meetings at DeKalb jail. And I started to get this network, and started to get this wonderful life, and all these people, and I had always wanted to have kids, and but it's a little difficult, when you're in a relationship with a female. Anyway, so so anyway, so we, I was still with, in this relationship, which lasted for a very long time, and I really wanted to carry on my mom, and so I wanted to have the kids. And so we tried, all these, it just did not happen, and so the last straw was I did in vitro, and, this was it, because financially I was like, I can't do this, anything else, and it worked, and, today I was at the pediatrician with my son, and he's 18, those kids, two kids had twins, they're 18, and I was there because he was getting a shot, and I just remembered when they were little babies, the first time I brought them in there, and they were tiny little on that little table, and I just was like, God, wow, I can't believe it, and so got pregnant, and had these, they're good kids. I'm just, I am very grateful for those kids. But I got really sick when I was pregnant, and I had to go on bed rest at 27 weeks, total bed rest. And man, you guys showed up. You guys came, and you just sat with me, and sat, and I was had to lay on my left side the entire time. I couldn't do anything. Shower, that was it. And you guys just showed up, and you cleaned my house, and you went to the grocery store, and you took me to doctor's appointments, and this baby shower. I mean, it was incredible. There was so many people there, from recovery, and it was this beautiful thing, and I, we'd go camping, I'd go on vacation with all these people in recovery, and and I had moved, and you'd think I moved across the state, but I only moved from Stone Mountain to Avondale, and something changed though, and I got, kids, twins, busy mom, they started school, and I slowly stopped going to meetings, and I stopped calling my sponsor, and I walked away kind of from this beautiful life I had. And the reason I had that beautiful life was because of what I did in here, and that was the only reason. But I forgot that, and I thought, I'm good. I've got it, and I had about, I don't know, it was 12, 13 years, and by the way, the whole higher power thing, God, whatever you want to call it, I did not have that, and it took me a long time to get that, and it took me till after my mom died, and I worked the steps, and that was where I got that, and it was an incredible thing to be able to get to a point where I knew I was going to be okay, and to go through that. So I just kind of stopped going to meetings, and just, life was good. But what I know today is if I'm comfortable, it's a scary place for me. I don't need to be comfortable for that long. And so that's why, I'm up here. This is pulling teeth for me to get up here and do this. I do not like to do this. But I do things that are uncomfortable today, because that's, where I grow. And I also have a higher power today that no matter what, I can go through anything. And so anyway, started going to meetings, and I had surgery, had a hysterectomy, and I relapsed on actually something besides alcohol. And I didn't really think I relapsed because I didn't drink alcohol, but then it got to where it was yeah, I did. And I, I'm not going to go into details because this is AA, and I totally respect that, and singleness of purpose, and my life became hell for about 8 years, and nobody knew. And from the outside, my life looked good. Job, kids, owned a house, all this stuff looked good, but nobody knew this hell I was living in. And I was like, I'm not going back to AA. I was like, ugh. And yeah, I was like, those people are crazy, And it's just so sick, just the disease was just like waiting for me. I mean, just waiting, and it's so scary how that happens. And so I finally was like, all right, I'm going to go back in the shame and guilt of walking back into Clarkston and picking up that white chip was, it was just, my pride, it was just, ugh. But I did it, and I walked back in there and yeah, it was probably the hardest first year I've ever had. It was hard. It was really hard, and I don't think I could do it again. And it was during COVID, and I was so desperate. I was so desperate, and we were on Zoom. I did meetings all the time, and I would just get your number. Can I get your number? Can I call you? Can I get your number? And I did it, and I called so many people. People I know, they were just like, God, Tamara's calling. Because I called anybody. I didn't care. And I got a sponsor. I hadn't even met her in person, even until we did my first step. And because I knew I didn't want to be in that pain anymore. And I knew that if I didn't do that, I was going to die. And so I did that. And I went through the steps, and it was the first time in 55 years that I was totally honest. And because it was always those couple little things, I was like, nah, I'm not going to say that. And my sponsor today is like somebody that will call me on my shit, because I have to have that, because I can manipulate anybody, and she knows that. And so, and I, went through all the steps, and then when I had a little over a year, the relationship, we were together for 23 years, and it just, it was very separate, and I just couldn't do anymore, and she was in recovery, but she wasn't doing recovery, and I was like, man, I'm going to die. I cannot do this, and so we, separated, and the kids, and I moved the kids with me, out of this house that all they knew, and we moved into a house. I rented a house, and we sold that house, and she moved to Florida to live with her mom and help her mom out. And it was hard. It was hard, even though I knew that was the right thing to do. It was hard, and it was a lot of grief, and just a lot of loss. And it was hard for my kids, and to watch them, to allow them to feel their pain was really fucking hard. Sorry, forgot it's being recorded. It just was, but I'm so grateful, because there were so many women that I reached out to that had been through that same kind of situation, and that's what I love about, AA, is that if my sponsor hadn't been through it, she'll give me somebody's name and say, hey, this person, give them a call. And so I did, and walked through that, but we actually lived together for about a year, and in the house, because her name was on the deed, and she wasn't going to leave, and so it was just like, okay, this is how it's supposed to be, and we did it, and then it just became time to separate, and so anyway, my kids, they are 18, and they're getting ready to go away to college in a couple weeks, and that's going to be a whole new journey for them, a whole new journey for me, and I'm super excited for them, but I'm also terrified. And they are good kids, and my daughter called, so she went to a graduation party for high school, and she was like, I was like, are they going to be drinking? And she's like, well, I don't know. I'm going to drive. So, and they don't, I mean, they might have drank a little bit, and as my person that partner that I'm dating now reminds me, Kimmer, they're not you. Because if it was me, oh yeah, I'd be drinking. But, so she actually, texted me from the party and was like, hey, is it okay if I leave my car here and get it tomorrow? And I was like, are you going to be drinking? And she's like, well, everybody's having fun. And I was like, I'm trying to be all calm, but I'm like, oh my God. and so she goes, and so I was like, okay. I said, how about this? Because I was like, I'll come get you about whatever, 12:30. I said 1. She said, well, 12:30 is probably fine. I was like, okay, 12:30. And I'll come get you, and then we'll also, my partner will drive your car home. And she was like, fine. And she was so grateful for me. And I picked her up, and she was like, I don't know, she had like a beer and some cooler or whatever, and she was fine. And she was so grateful that she was able to talk to me about that, and I'm, grateful that I've been through what I've been through to be able to talk to her about that. And she, went through a really bad depression for about 2 years, and it was scary, and I didn't want to leave her by herself. But I have gone through that, and so I was able to help, just be there for her and love her, and, and she sought outside help. I didn't need to be her therapist, I was able to say, here, and she did that, and she's like this, completely full circle, and it's just amazing to watch these 2 kids that have come through me, and it's just, it's like, wow, that, and just because I was hell, and they're just good kids, and I just started working the steps again because I am a firm believer in being in the steps, not just being in the steps, but, a lot of times I can work the steps, so if I'm not living the steps, then, there's a big difference between those 2 things. And so I just started working the steps, and actually Al-Anon steps, but anyway, won't go there. But, I do need to, I'm in another relationship, so, all those character defects just come up. So, Al-Anon, here we go. And, but yeah, I'm a member of Al-Anon, I'm a member of Narcotics Anonymous, and I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I got a lot of issues. So, but you know what? I want more today. And that's the bottom line, is I want more. I don't want to just, not drink, whatever, And I want those freedoms that are talked about. And anyway, I think I'm done, and that's it. So.
Thank you, Tamara. I heard a lot of my story and your story, and it's amazing. I love it so much.
First I slept, and then I crept to a hope-filled dream. You rescued me, and finally, waking there I see. I look into love's window for a soul that's meant for me. Takes me where the promises are real. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slow, we get just what we need. On a broad highway, stride for stride, we walk eternally. I look into love's window for a heart that beats for me. Takes me where the promises are real. belong.